Hi everyone, I'm Brianna and welcome to Roll Initiative. Today we're going to be talking a lot about role-playing NPCs and how you can make them different, unique, and interesting. So, let's get started. It's really hard to make NPCs that seem different. Quite often they feel a lot like the same character. And that's because they're all being played by one person. And it can be difficult to come up with personalities for different people when they're all played by you. So today we're going to be having a look at a few different things that you can play around with to be able to make completely different NPCs. So let's get started. Making so many different personalities for your NPCs can be really difficult. And a few things that I find work really well for me is using different parts of your personality, almost like your moods. Sometimes you can be really happy and enthusiastic, and you can channel that for one NPC. And sometimes you might get kind of sarcastic and snarky, and that can work really well for another NPC. Channeling your different moods to create different NPCs can actually work really well because you're already so familiar with those moods. And another thing that I find works really well is trying to give your NPC one really strong trait such as being nervous. And then that is a bit of their personality. It's trying to make them sort of based around being nervous. They might be really fidgety and hesitant and quite worried. Or you can have an NPC that's really overconfident, or one that's really overly apologetic. Personalities like these are really easy to imagine because you know what all of these traits are. Now you just exaggerate them and you have a sort of personality for your NPC. If you do voices for your NPCs, then you'd probably know how hard it can be sometimes to make voices that sound different from each other. And one really important thing is your pitch. When you raise your voice so that you're talking in a much higher pitch, or if you lower it so that you're talking in a much deeper pitch, then your players will instantly be able to pick up that you're not doing your normal voice, and people are very good at picking up when there's a difference in pitch. So even if you have two NPCs talking to each other, if they have different pitches for their voices, even if the voice is still your own, then they will sound different and your players will be able to tell which one of them is saying what. And how quickly you talk can also make a massive difference to how your NPC sounds. Like, if you talk really, really quickly, then it might be that you have a young or really excitable, happy character. Whereas if you talk a lot slower, you might have an older or more worn, maybe even a more serious character. But there are still a lot of different ways that you can make your NPCs sound different. And another way that I really like is using different language. Whether one of your NPCs talks with really fancy, extravagant language, or whether one of them talks like a bit of a brute, like a stereotypical barbarian. Or you can even just have a bit of a phrase that NPC uses often, such as starting almost every sentence with the same word, such as an NPC saying, "Well, I don't know. Well, this doesn't seem like a great idea. Well, maybe." Just having something like that can make your NPC sound really unique. Coming up with different names for NPCs can be really, really difficult. And one of my favorite ways to do it is just spam a couple keys on the keyboard and then try and turn it into a word, or just try and mess with it until it sounds like a cool name. You might have to try this a few times before you just get something that clicks, but I think you can come up with some really unique names doing this. And if you're put on the spot and don't have a name for an NPC that your players want to talk to, then my best advice is to have a list of names already written out, and you can just choose one off the list whenever you need a name, just on the spot. And if you wanted to go further than that, then you can even have different lists of names for different races, like you might have Elvish names or Orcish names. Then you'll have different names that feel like they fit, even if they're different races. Even if your NPCs feel really different from one another, it's still really important to make sure that they act differently. Because not all NPCs who aren't bad guys have to be nice to the party. And I think there is quite a lack of NPCs who aren't bad guys but aren't friendly towards the party. And while NPCs that are friendly towards the party are good, and probably better for the majority, I think it's really good if there are some NPCs who just don't like the party to start with, because that gives your players a chance to try and win them over, make them view them differently. And that can be a lot of fun. And the characteristics of an NPC should be memorable and make them stand out, such as it could be how they look. Though an important thing with this is to not just have really detailed descriptions for every NPC that are really detailed and interesting. Try and focus on one or two things that will make this character stand out. It could be a scar, some sort of ring, a medallion, or some sort of piece of jewelry or something, or even something to do with what they're wearing. Just one or two things that make the character interesting. Or you could even use a goal or dream of the NPCs. Because if they have a dream that the players can help with in exchange for something that the players want or need for the story, then if it's an interesting goal, then your players are likely to remember helping that NPC. Such as if the NPC wants to get into an adventurers guild, and the party are renowned adventurers, so they might be able to help him get into the guild. Then your party is likely to remember helping that NPC, and maybe they can even see him later and benefit them having a friend in the guild. But there we go, that's the end of this video, and I really hope it was helpful and that you enjoyed it. And if you did, then I'd be really grateful if you'd consider giving it a like, or maybe even subscribing to my channel. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.